Hi everyone, I've recently upgraded from the iPhone 6s, which I started off making this YouTube channel with and short films, to the iPhone 12, which I'm filming with right now. So I want to find out, having been curious to know, what the differences are between the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 12 in terms of smartphone filmmaking in different categories that we usually struggle with phones. Is it a little bit better or is it a lot better? Let's find out. Now the first thing we're going to look at in terms of comparisons are the details you can capture in these images. Now on the iPhone 6s here, I should let you know all these shots in the whole video are shot in 4K, so the details should be really spot on. Now with the iPhone 6s, it kind of holds its own really when you look at it on the face of things, but when you get closer, you can see that the details start to disappear and start to get a bit pixelated, a bit kind of noisy, and that's not something you really want on an image. Now the iPhone 12, we are shooting in 10-bit for the iPhone 12, but ignore that for now, just looking at the details. You can see the edges look really smooth and everything just looks a little bit more polished, whereas with the iPhone 6s it looks a bit rough around the edges, and if we zoom into the iPhone 12 image, that 4K resolution really holds up when you zoom in. You can see the detail on the center of the flower head, the petals, everything is smooth and really on point, even when you zoom in to quite a far extent. And now you put them side by side, you can really see the difference here. On the left, you've got the petals looking a bit rough around the edges, a little bit pixelated again. On the right, that's not really happening with the iPhone 12. It really holds that detail when you zoom in. And the central part, again, you're seeing that detail fade away from the left side with the iPhone 6s, but the 12 is really holding its own really close up to the subject. Now here's a really nice shot. You've got the light shining through the leaf, so you can see all those veins. You've got the browns, the greens really kind of looking a little bit faded, to be honest. I was going to say popping, but they're not popping, they're faded, aren't they? And with the 6s, it is catching quite a bit of detail. Again, it is 4K. So on the face of it, again, you're looking at a really nice image here, and you probably wouldn't think twice about it. Certainly an average Joe wouldn't. But here you're seeing the iPhone 12 shot, and you can see the details really holding up now and looking really nice on that leaf. You've got the browns looking nice, you've got the greens kind of popping, and that detail that perhaps was being lost in the actual leaf veins itself is really starting to show now. And even the little kind of dots in the leaf are showing up as well in this 4K image with the iPhone 12. So the level of detail you can get with this is actually quite phenomenal, the iPhone 12. And I'm really happy with how far the phones have advanced from 5 years ago, the 6s, to now the iPhone 12. We're really seeing quite a advance in technology over those years. Now we can see it also handles the highlights better than the 6s, and it brings more color because of it. Now this is the bird feeder in my back garden, so the seeds on the iPhone 6s shot are really starting to be a bit rough around the edges, particularly towards the bottom of that shot, and it really doesn't hold the highlights that well at all. Whereas the iPhone 12, you can see it really handles highlights a lot better because of that bigger lens that you're using. It's capturing a lot more light, and a bigger sensor can handle the more light coming in. So it's looking a lot better. Now we're going to take our focus onto the depth of field comparisons. Now the iPhone 6s, again, on the face of it, it looks like quite a nice shot. The detail's not too bad in the wood that you're seeing crossed over there. In the background, the tree on the right, the bush on the left, it's all looking pretty blurred. No, obviously not as much as a DSLR camera, but quite blurred. Now with the iPhone 12, you can see that kind of bokeh effect really stepping up a notch, and that comes from a better aperture f-stop number. And when you see them side by side, you can really see the difference here. On the right, on the left of this cross, you can really see on the iPhone 12 that that bokeh, that blur effect, is increased tenfold. And on the left, you can see that fencing quite clearly behind it and the white wall behind that fencing. Whereas on the iPhone 12, all of that has much more of a blurred effect, that bokeh effect that we really want in our smartphone filmmaking. On this shot, again, I want to look at the trees in the background, and even that deck chair to the right is where it's really showing up. Now on this iPhone 6s, the pumpkin that's really close to the lens is really nice and in focus, but when we go to the iPhone 12, you're seeing it's looking a little bit clearer, and that bokeh effect on the background is still holding up really, really well. And when you put them side by side, it's even more obvious. So I think the development from iPhone 6s all the way to 12 in terms of the depth of field maybe hasn't come as far as I'd have liked, or we'd all would have liked, but it is certainly improving with every phone that happens. And with the 13, I've seen quite big improvements as well, although it's not a huge improvement on the iPhone 12, I have to say. In this image, you can even see when the background is quite close to the subject, you're getting a lot more bokeh effect from the iPhone 12. So when you're getting shots of a close-up subject, it can work really, really well. Now this one you can see with the flower, the iPhone 6s, you're getting some nice bokehing on the background, but it simply doesn't compare to the iPhone 12, and it looks really great on the iPhone 12. The blur on the houses, the trees in the background, even the fence that's not that far away, perhaps about 10 feet away, is blurred as well, which is a really great thing to have on a smartphone. And it's really nice to see that that bokeh effect on the iPhone 12 is really strong, and I think, you know, it's worth the upgrade 100%. Now I want to show you some low light comparisons between these two phones, but before I do, I want you to know that I shot this in 24 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/48. So you can see exactly under film conditions what kind of shots you're going to get and how accurate this test is. Now this is going to be a really interesting comparison. We're looking at a low light test. Now with the iPhone 6s, you can see it really doesn't handle any kind of low light very well. There's quite a lot of light coming from behind me outside on a main road and light coming from ahead, and it was so dark. But with the iPhone 12, you can see that the light is much, much brighter. You can see in the shadow areas, you actually can see the windows now that were at the back. Whereas with the 6S, you couldn't even see about halfway down this little room. And in the comparison side by side here, you can really see how dark the shadows are. And again, this is in broad daylight. There's a lot of light coming from behind me. But even if you're in a slightly shadow area, these old phones just don't handle that low light area and that sensitivity very well at all. And you can see a lot more detail, of course, when the light comes out in the iPhone 12. And it is literally night and day between the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 12 in these low light situations. Now here, there's actually a lot more light than it looks here. With the iPhone 6s, you can just see one lamp in the far distance on the right-hand side, but I promise you, there was more light. This, with the iPhone 12, is exactly how I saw it. The lens on this phone is so good. It actually shows you pretty much what your eye sees in all situations and all low light levels. Now in this area, the lights are quite far away. With the iPhone 6s, if the lights are quite far from the lens, it really struggles to pick that light up. And you can see, even when you're moving around, no matter where you're looking, it's not improving at all, no matter what you do. Now with the iPhone 12, this is completely lit up. There are lots of lights all around this hallway, and it's basically looks like you're outdoors in the bright sunlight, even though this is more in sort of that golden hour period of the day. In this alleyway, it kind of gives a bit of a noir feel. At the end of it, you can see the shadows of people, the silhouettes of people walking past, which I quite like. But it's really, apart from creating a noir kind of feel to a film, or something a bit more dramatic, it really doesn't have much use when it's this dark. Again, with the iPhone 12, you see the whole place transform under this lens. The whole place is lit up, and you can use it for filmmaking in all sorts of scenes and scenarios, and you can even have a face lit up by those lights on the side. Now at the train station here, again, we're doing 24 frames per second with a 1/48 shutter speed, which just makes the image too dark here, and the lights are so far away from the iPhone 6s that it just can't make the most of the available light that's there, and the whole image is unusable at this level, so you couldn't use that for filmmaking in this area. Now the iPhone 12, again, you'll see it transform the place. This again is how my eyes saw the train station. So really impressed with how far these phones have come with low light filmmaking. Now with the stabilization test, I promise you the iPhone 6s and the 12, I was trying to walk as smoothly and gently as possible. Now I wasn't doing the ninja walk because I was too embarrassed to do that in front of all these people, but I can assure you I tried to make this as smooth as possible, and my hands are quite shaky anyway, which didn't help, and the iPhone 6s is just unusable when you're trying to walk around using the stabilization. With the iPhone 12, it is a completely different situation. I would say, particularly if you're walking in straight lines on flat surfaces, I would probably use the iPhone 12 on its own with the stabilization over a gimbal like an Osmo Mobile 3 that I have. It really was that smooth, and as you can see, I'm walking for quite a long distance with this, and you're not getting any bumps, any jitters, and with a ninja walk, you could probably smooth that out even more. Here, now these cobbly kind of streets are quite bumpy, so this again was quite a hard service to get it right. And I'm promising you, I was trying to make this as smooth as possible, but it just wasn't working with the iPhone 6s. I've tried to use this in films that I've used as well, and it's just horrific trying to get any kind of smooth motion and stabilization out of the 6s. Now, whilst this wasn't perfect, it was a lot better with the iPhone 12. And I do think with the ninja walk, if I'd really put the time into it, I could have got a really silky smooth shot out of this. I was in a bit of a rush, but as you can see, it is improving dramatically on the 6s. Now here I wanted a bit of a test, so going up the stairs and across and down some stairs. With the 6s, it had a bit of a found footage feel about it, almost Blair Witch kind of feel about it, although this is daytime, obviously. I don't think witches come out at daytime. And as we go across and then go down the stairs, you can see it's quite bumpy, quite lumpy, and unless you're going for maybe an action film perhaps, this isn't really going to work for any kind of filmmaking with a smartphone of a 6s variety. With the 12, it's obviously a lot smoother. I did notice though, as I go up the stairs here and turn to my left, you see it kind of jolts to the side a little bit sort of artificially. So I don't know if that's something that could be smoothed out with a bit more smoother motion for myself, but that is something I noticed. Other than that though, going up and down stairs as well, really, really smooth footage. Now clearly so far the iPhone 12 has been pretty much leaps and bounds ahead of the iPhone 6s, which we would have hoped in most areas, but there is one area where the iPhone 6s is actually better than the iPhone 12. I repeat, better than the iPhone 12. And that is when it comes to lens flares. Now lens flares can look really good. I certainly used them in a couple of films, and if you watch stuff like The Walking Dead, it's used all the time, and if it's used in the right way, it can look brilliant. But there are situations where it really is not good to have at all, and in fact, it's quite distracting. Now I did know that there would be some lens flaring with the iPhone 12, but nothing prepared me for how much lens flaring you get at night time. Now here you can see, even with this small light, that isn't that powerful, it produced quite a flare. And with lamps as well, not that you'd always be pointing up at the sky or anything, but it really is obvious that it's just a bulb floating in the sky, with the bigger the bulb is on the source of light. Now with these cars, you can see the kind of flares dancing across the road, which really distracts from any kind of story you're making. And whilst it might seem a bit subtle, when it's on a car like this, it really, really stands out quite a lot. Now the distance to the light source does seem to make quite a difference as well. So if I'm about 20 feet away from this street lamp here, and you can see that flaring, which actually looks quite nice, but again, you might not want that in your smartphone filmmaking film, and if you go to the skies, you're going to get that dot dancing around as well. With the lamps in the distance, about 100 feet in the distance, you're not going to have that kind of issue at all. Now with this big lamp here in a hallway, you're going to get really bad shadowing. You might not have this kind of a shot necessarily, but if you're doing a horror film, something like that, that could really ruin your shot and make the whole scene look really bad. In daytime, there's a lot of daylight surrounding you. It's not really an issue, as I say. This is just under the stairs, but all around me, behind me, is a walkway next to the River Thames that was full of daylight. And you can see there in the background how light it was, and you don't get that kind of flaring. Even with these light bulbs above me here, you're not getting any kind of flaring. The single bulbs are quite dim anyway, but those strip lights are particularly quite strong. And even in the daylight, you're not getting that lens flare issue. So at night time, it really is an issue. Daytime, not so much. Now, if you're particularly eagle-eyed, you'd have noticed in this scene that 6S really, whilst didn't pick up much light, it wasn't having a flare issue as such, so you weren't having any problems like that. Whereas with the 12, you can see the flares on the right here really, really clearly, and it just makes this shot almost impossible to use in a film or anything that you're making without getting about 10 different flares dancing across the screen. Really disappointed in the flaring that you get from the iPhone 12, and I know it's in the iPhone 13 as well from videos that I've seen. Whilst flares can look good, this for me is a real downside to the latest phones that you can buy. Now the iPhone 6s, you get a wide angle lens which has an aperture of an f-stop 2.2, and with the iPhone 12 you get two lenses, the wide with an aperture of f-stop 1.6 and an ultra wide with an aperture f-stop of 2.4. So that allows you to use that ultra wide and get a much more grand kind of landscape shot. And I love this, it really, really is great. Now you can see on the edges, normally you'd get kind of like aberrations, bit of noise or something like that, but you don't get that with this lens. Now this is the normal wide on the iPhone 12. When you pop back to that ultra wide, you can see the difference that it makes. And it's not particularly great in low light issues at all, but in daylight outside, it works really well for establishing shots. Now something to note is with the iPhone 6s in selfie mode, you can only record up to 720p. What? Whereas the iPhone 12, you can record in up to 4K in selfie mode, which is obviously a lot better for vlogging and things like that. Well, I hope this has been a helpful video for you guys. If you have enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Let me know what you thought about these differences between the phones, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.